Welcome back. I'm Gila Ross, author of Living Beautifully and host of the Patriarchs podcast, where we share short, relatable ideas to impact and upgrade your everyday life. We have many biblical personalities. They're there for us to learn from their personality, from their character traits, from their life experiences, from their stories. Why were 3 of them singled out to be the fathers of the nation and 4 of the women singled out to be the mothers of the nation? What's different? Why do we need that? What's different about them than, for example, Moses and Aaron or Adam and Eve? If you think about it, what does a parent pass down to a child at a very basic level? Yes, their genes, their DNA, right? Before you get into anything extra, a parent passes on the DNA to their children. Our forefathers and our foremothers passed on to us certain character traits that they sort of encoded into our spiritual DNA. What was it? We're specifically going to look at why we needed 3, right? Because why wasn't it enough just to have Avraham? Avraham could have been the forefather, and then that's it. Yitzchak could have been just another biblical personality, but it's not. Avraham implanted something within our DNA. Yitzchak implanted something else within our DNA, and Yaakov implanted something else within our DNA. Let's start with Avraham. Does anyone know what Avraham was renowned for? And you can use the sheet too. Kindness, chesed. Wow, well done, everyone. Yes. Avraham famous for is he had a tent, and the tent was open on all 4 sides, which was symbolic of the fact that he had this open home. And everyone was invited in. God commanded him to have a Brit Milah, and he's had it at the age of 99, and he's in excruciating pain. And on day 3, when he's in excruciating pain, he's complaining that no one's coming to visit him. So he was someone who was the epitome of chesed, of kindness. And that's and if you think about kindness is very much a giving attribute. It's almost like the parent to child relationship. I was talking to one of my students this morning, and she just had her first baby a few months ago, and she's in that transition stage of going from a regular person to becoming a parent. She reached out because she wanted some advice and whatever. And if you think about it, a parent gives and gives and gives and gives and gives so much to a child, right? Like there's that chesed is that outpouring, that very positive part of giving. And Avraham had this, and he implanted it within our DNA. We'll talk about what it means to have that implanted within our DNA in a moment. Then, what is Yitzchak? Isaac was famous for, anyone knows? Well done, Gevura, right? Which is like this inner strength, this discipline, right? Yitzchak was very much a person who was spent his life studying Torah. He was extremely disciplined as a person. It's almost like if chesed is giving, like Gevura is almost like holding back. Very often the discipline is, sometimes we have to push ourselves to go out and do something, but very often that discipline is holding back, setting boundaries and holding back from the negative. And it's kind of like that relationship of master to a servant to a master, right? Like a servant to, someone who's subservient to someone else. Like there's a bit of a distance. There's that. Let me ask you a question. Is kindness good? Sorry?
If you give where you burn yourself out, that's not good.
Okay.
It depends how much.
It depends how much.
You can also give in a way that's not helpful.
Right.
Do you want to share an example of something like that?
I think just assisting somebody so much that they never learn to do all for themselves.
There's
Beautiful.
also that's one aspect of it, and another aspect of it is when you think of Bichar Cholim. So when you think of visiting a sick person, the halacha is you visit them in a way that's helpful to them. Kindness that to you feels like a kindness, but isn't a kindness to the person that you're giving it to. Isn't kindness.
Yes.
The world seems to have this tendency of being cruel to the kind and kind to the cruel.
Yes, and I think we're all kind of thinking along the same lines of what you're thing. And a classic example of that is, you know, giving an alcoholic a drink. Is that a helpful thing to do? It's not only is it not helpful, but it can be incredibly harmful. Incredibly harmful. So we see that chesed is something that could be incredibly helpful, and in the wrong time or the wrong way, could be incredibly harmful. What about discipline? Good or bad?
Same thing.
Same thing. Example of when discipline is good. When is discipline good? Setting boundaries. Give us an example of when discipline could be harmful.
It's obsessive.
Yep.
When you're inflexible. A friend gave the example that there was a change of plans and one of her kids like couldn't handle, like, because it wasn't part of the disciplined routine. The kid had a total meltdown. Like the discipline caused the kid to have a meltdown.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, an example that's coming to mind is, you know, God forbid, someone who has anorexia. That is discipline taken to an extremely harmful degree, right? So we see that both chesed and kindness and gevura, both kindness and discipline, can be amazing and can be incredibly harmful as well if they're not used in the right place in the right time. So how do we know when to use kindness and when to use, like, because it's not always so simple. Has anyone here ever been in a situation where you're not quite sure if it's kind to do the thing or not kind? Same thing with discipline. Not quite sure, is it good to be disciplined or not? Am I taking this too far? So how do we know? That's where Jacob came in, right? Because how would you define truth? How would you find emes? Okay, I'll give you a class. Let's say your friend comes to you and she asks you, you know, she's wearing a dress that she absolutely loves. And she asks you, do you like my dress? And you don't. Should you tell her?
If she already bought it, no. If she's in the store trying it on, you can say something.
Marla, like you have a good memory from.
The question here is a little bit different. The question here, she didn't ask if it looks good on her. She's asking if you like it.
My answer would be, why does it matter to you if I like it? If you like it, then you like it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if they're asking, I think you don't like it, that's okay, but maybe ask questions.
Okay. Anyone else? What does anyone else think?
We're sensitive, then you're gonna say you like it.
I just think
No matter what.
it's so important to be honest.
Always? And how do you define honesty?
I think you have to be careful how you are honest. So it's the way you respond. Like if you bought a dress, you like this dress and you said, do you like it? I would say, it's not something I would wear, but if this is something that you like, you know, I think that's a good choice for you then.
But when I ask my husband if he likes my dress, that I'm beautiful and this is it. Here, questions or something, it makes me better. Probably he doesn't like it in 80%, but I need this response. Doesn't matter. He likes it or not.
And then it also depends on the relationship with the person.
Yeah.
Because if it's like,
Yeah.
if it's like my friend Marla,
Yeah.
I would say, Marla, I think this other dress might look, you know, nicer, like in my opinion. Maybe you want to try that on, but if you're really happy in it, that's what you should do.
You know, the Talmud talks about the situation, and I love that we're discussing it because this is the point that I wanted to bring up more than what the answer is. The Talmud brings up the situation if, let's say, a bride and a groom are getting married, and you think the bride is not beautiful. Are you supposed to say to the groom, "Oh, your bride is beautiful"? Or are you supposed to tell her like, "Oh no, she's ugly"?
Yes, you have to say she's beautiful. You have to say she's beautiful. I read something like that.
It's a lot different than a dress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Humans are beautiful, we're made in God's image, and I think everyone has a beauty to them, so I don't think, you know, for me, I don't think anyone's
I think it's, but isn't it,
You know.
if you are asked the question and you don't just volunteer?
But I think I think it's different. A dress is different than
Than
a
a
person.
person.
So when you're
Right.
talking about a person, she may not be physically beautiful, but she's a beautiful person and it's her wedding day and she's a beautiful bride.
Right. So the Talmud discuss, yeah, what was your point?
My point is that if somebody says, like, if you're in a position to have to say something, but if you're not, isn't it best to not say anything?
It's kind of like, you know, I'll give you another example, right? A woman has a baby, and you know, it feels great to have people say, "Oh, your baby's so beautiful, your baby's so cute." Not, if I can I say this, not all newborns are beautiful or cute, right?
They're not beautiful or they're not cute, they're sweet.
The similar thing is, do you keep quiet and not say anything to the mother, or do you say to the mother, "Oh my gosh, your baby's so cute," even when you don't necessarily think so, just to make the woman feel good?
I've never seen a not cute baby before.
Really?
I've never seen a not cute baby.
You want to make somebody feel good.
Right. So what would you say? You would say something even if you, yeah, I think we,
It's like, why I would say that your baby is ugly.
yeah.
It's okay, she can go into her forehead.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, it's a very vulnerable stage in life, and if you can take that comment and say something nice and make her feel good, it's question whether you should be honest in that situation, right? You look at the baby and you think, wow, you grow, whatever. But we're talking about brand new baby, right? So and I don't want this to turn into thing. I'm just using it as a case study that if what's the right thing to do? Is the right thing to be honest and keep quiet, or is the right thing to use your words and say something that's going to make this mother feel good about her baby, or this groom feel good about his bride? Yes.
So isn't there that teaching that whether it's a baby or meet somebody, and if there's something you don't like, you look for the person, like find something on them that you like, and then compliment that.
Yes, you can do so. And my point wasn't to dissect these cases. My point was to pinpoint that look how long we've spent discussing it, right? Because there are so many situations that are complex that it's not so easy to be just kind of say, oh, the right thing is to do this or the right thing is to do that. We have to discuss and we have to look into the case study. We have to study the Torah, right? Which is, and interestingly, there is difference of opinions, right? Hillel says you should say Kalana v'chasuda. Your bride is beautiful and pleasant, and Shammai says no. You should find something that you can compliment about her and compliment. Again, there's differences of opinions, and if you're faced with that, ask someone what to do in that situation. But my point in highlighting these different types of situations is to show that it can be hard to know, do we hold back? That's where Yaakov comes in. He studied the Torah, and the Torah helps us to understand when to do the appropriate thing at the appropriate time. Because chesed and gevura are only good when you use it the appropriate thing at the appropriate time. Otherwise, it can become perverted. I'll tell you a story that took place in Israel. This was actually many, many years ago, before the current war that's going on. There's a rabbi called Rabbi Goldwicht, was the rabbi of a yeshiva. And it happened to be that one day in the yeshiva, there was unfortunately a tragedy where one of his students had been killed and on the very same day, there was another student that was getting married. So if you think about this, all the boys in that yeshiva had to go from a funeral of a peer to the wedding of a peer in later on in that day. And they went and they cried at their friend's funeral, and then later on in the afternoon they went and they danced and they celebrated with their friend that got married. And somebody asked Rabbi Goldwicht, he said, how were the students able to have that emotional strength to go from this to that in one day? And Rabbi Goldwicht explained, he said to them, is what studying Torah helps a person do, is it helps them channel their emotions in a way and understand the appropriate time. To mourn and cry and be devastated at a funeral is appropriate. It's appropriate to do that. We do that. We give voice to those emotions. We give voice to that. And then when it came to their friend's wedding, it's appropriate to sing and dance and celebrate with their friends. And I'm sure each of these students struggled with it in their own way. And I'm sure they had their own process of grief that they had to go through. But the fact that they were able to interrupt that to celebrate at their friend's wedding and be there for their, because if you can think about the peer that's getting married, it's also an incredible challenge, and they were able to be there for them is a testament to the fact that they were able to use the Torah to do the appropriate thing at the appropriate time. Now, here's the fascinating thing about it, is that each of these fathers had one of these. Avraham had chesed, Yitzchak had gevurah. Each of them were challenged in the opposite one, right? Let's talk about Avraham. Avraham, as we said, was someone who was chesed, kindness, right? He went out, he invited people into his home, he built altars, he built a relationship with God, he brought Torah into the world, he taught everyone. What were his tests? His tests were to go and leave your father. Leave your father's home, leave everything you know behind. Can you imagine for someone who's giving and kind, how hard it is to be able to do that? His test was to send his son Yishmael away from his house. Can you imagine how hard all these tests were? His tests were all in the opposite character trait. His tests were all in the character trait of developing that gevurah, that discipline, that ability to be able to say that, no, you know what, for whatever reason, it's not good for me to be in my father's home, and if God tells me I have to leave, I have to leave. Why do you think he was tested in the opposite? Or why wasn't it good enough that he can just be this kind, giving person and just continue developing that and again? Why did God have to test him specifically to develop this discipline, this gevurah?
To get more balanced.
And growth comes through adversity as opposed to through things. When things come easy to us, growth is a lot more is slower, if it happens at all, because it's a comfortable place. Where tests push your limits and push you outside of the comfort zone, and growth happens a lot more completely and is internalized a lot more, because it's hard.
Yes, Gabriella? Yes, thank
Right.
you.
That's our weak points have to be strengthened. That's exactly what we're not good at. That's the test. That's where
Yeah, can I ask you a question? Which one is better, chesed or gevurah, kindness or discipline?
they're both needed in the right amount.
They're both needed. Exactly. We need both, right? You can't just be, as we saw earlier, you can't just be chesed, giving, because sometimes we have to hold back. And we can't just be disciplined and control, because sometimes we have to give. And what we see with Yitzchak he was so disciplined that when he found out that his father was prepared to sacrifice him, he said yes. He agreed to do that. Right? And what was his test in life? He was required to dig wells. And what is well? A well is where water comes. Water is life-giving, nurturing, and it's symbolic of chesed, of giving. And those wells kept getting stuffed, and he had to rebuild them and rebuild them again. What did he have to do? He was required to develop the chesed, the kindness out of it. And what's interesting is that Avraham and Yitzchak often, like, they had the Akedah, the sacrifice of Yitzchak, they both participated in it. So externally, it could look the same, but internally, the struggle was very different, because the struggle for Avraham was the struggle of, what do you mean? I'm a giving person. How am I supposed to be able to hold back from giving my love and everything to my child, because God wants me to? How am I supposed to be able to do that? Similarly, the giving of the wells, that for Yitzchak was easy. For Avraham was easy, the wells, because that was his mode, his natural mode. For Yitzchak, it was hard. It was what developed that kindness within us. And I think this brings us to Nina's point, back to our life, because this is kind of the prototype that we have, is that each of us have a natural disposition either to the kindness or to the discipline. One of the ways I think we can tell is if we're more naturally disposed to saying yes, 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 or more naturally disposed to saying no, no, no. Now, neither of them are better than the other. We need them both. But what's going to happen in our life is that we're going to get tested in the other area. So if we're naturally more of a kind, giving person, we are going to be tested in our lives, times where we have to develop that discipline, that inner strength. And if we are people that are naturally more disciplined, more boundaried, we are going to be challenged in our life over and over again to give, right? To be able to say yes, to be able to give. Why? Because we need both, because the beauty, as Cheryl told us at the beginning, Tiferet is a character trait that's called beauty. The harmony comes from using the right thing in the right time. The truth is using the appropriate thing in the appropriate time. And yes, absolutely, Torah study is what gets that. And that was what Jacob developed, is he developed this ability to act with balance, right? When he was traveling, he took 12 stones and he lay down on them. And overnight, the stones all became one. Why? Because it's symbolic of this idea that all the different character traits became merged into using it in a balanced. And these three character traits, the character trait of kindness, of discipline, and of emes, of truth, is what each of the forefathers implanted within our spiritual DNA. What does that mean? It means that each of us and Jewish people throughout the world have the potential for it. We have the potential for kindness. We see this. You know, there are so many chesed organizations within the Jewish world, so many within the Jewish world. A disproportionate amount. Israel is so often at the forefront of whenever there's a disaster or a crisis in the world. They are at the forefront. Why? Because it was implanted within our DNA, the potential. We still have to activate it, but we have that potential. The same thing with discipline. You hear of so many stories of people who went through great strengths in order to I'll give you an example. There's a story a woman who wanted her children to have a Jewish education. She wasn't particularly religious. But it was so important for her for her children to have a Jewish education that she used to travel on the subway for hours every day just so that so that her children would have this Jewish education. Like where does a woman get this discipline, right? The strength, the inner strength to do that? It's because we have it. Again, we have the potential for it. We still have to activate it, but we have that potential. And I'm sure if you think for a moment about your own life, I'm sure there are things in your own life, like hard things that you've done in your own life. Where do you get the strength and the commitment to do it? It's because within us, we have the potential for it. We have to activate it, but we still have the potential. And we have the potential to learn how to balance those two, to learn how to balance the giving and balance the discipline so that we're using the appropriate thing at the appropriate time. And that's how we make sure that the giving is helpful and not harmful. What about the matriarchs? So we see the same pattern with the matriarchs as well. Except very interesting thing. Avraham was married to Sarah. And what was Sarah? Sarah was Gevurah, inner strength, right? She was the one who was able to see that Ishmael was a negative influence on Isaac and told her husband to send him away. And what did she have to do? She had to develop the chesed, the giving, by bringing people into her house, by having Hagar, right? Letting her maidservant marry Avraham, her husband, right? So she had to develop it. It's interesting that Avraham and Sarah, they had opposites, right? Yitzchak and Rivka, it's the same thing. Rivka was chesed, kindness, that when Eliezer went to find a wife for Yitzchak, she was the one that went over to her and said, I will give water to you and all your camels, which was a massive act of kindness for her. And she had to develop the trait of discipline. And Yaakov had two wives, right? Leah, who was dominant character trait was gevura, was discipline, strength, and Rachel, whose dominant character trait is chesed, like even nowadays. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear your feedback, and if you enjoyed this episode, you'll love my book, Living Beautifully: How to Bring Meaning, Joy, and Love into Your Life, based on the timeless wisdom of Pirkei Avot. And please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. Have a wonderful day.